Hello and good night, viewers. Welcome to another episode of We TV, making a difference in your community. I am your host, Teromi Lourdes Joseph. In episode 9 of the series, we are giving you insight on the Coastal Protection Program under the Ministry's Coastal Protection Unit. So stay tuned to see how the Ministry is addressing the coastal areas that require emergency coastal protection. Reagan, along with some of the people involved in this work, will be giving a first-hand look via a tour of the north and south coastlines. Take it away, Reagan.
Thanks so much, Teromi. Right now in the office of Khafi Weeks, who is the program coordinator of the Coastal Protection Unit. Thanks for having us, Miss Weeks.
I'm really happy to have you here.
No problems. Maybe we can start with a definition. What exactly is coastal erosion?
Coastal erosion is basically a long-term loss of land in an inland direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It means the island's getting smaller.
It doesn't mean the island's getting smaller. Coastal erosion is a natural process. So while there may be some areas of the coastline that is actually, well, in coastal terms we say accreting seaward, which means that there's a settlement of sediment towards the sea is actually increasing in area. There are some areas that are actually, moving into the land. So it's a dynamic process, and it's totally normal and natural. The problem, however, is when there's a lot of development on the coastline, because I don't know if you're aware of the statistic, there's 70% of the Caribbean population lives on less than 1 mile away from the shoreline.
Okay.
So that is why
it's potentially dangerous.
Yes, that's why coastal erosion becomes problematic, but it is actually a natural process.
So then why does coastal erosion actually happen?
A coastline is made up of many different types of sediments, right? There could be metamorphic rock, which is pretty hard, which would not be that susceptible to the forces of wave action. And there may be parts of the coastline that's made up of mud and clay, which is really crumbly. And so wave action would easily remove some of that material. So once you understand that sometimes the coastal environment could be either quite mild, like say for instance in the Gulf of Paria, or it could be quite active and high energy, like along the eastern seaboard of Trinidad, where we have direct exposure to the Atlantic Ocean, trade winds, and also localized squalls and stuff like that. Squalls meaning small storms.
Let's look at the extreme negative effects. How does this impact us in TNT? Before I get into what types of studies you do, because you said it's a long-term project, you keep pointing out that sometimes things happen that are not supposed to happen along the coast, namely like when people live very close and sometimes illegal activities happen. What types of things that are done by man that negatively affect our coastlines?
There's a plethora of things that people do that affects the coastline. As you rightfully said, sometimes people build too close to the high water mark.
It's all very geographic and geological, as you say, lots of terminologies. Throughout this episode, we'll explain a lot of things that we couldn't necessarily cover in this interview per se.
Right.
But thank you so much for having us here. It was a pleasure. Coming up very shortly, we'll be checking out some of the coastal areas along TNT's coastlines, and of course, giving you a glimpse at exactly what coastal erosion looks like. Stay tuned.
The Ministry of Works and Infrastructure's Coastal Protection Unit's inaugural Coastal Technologies Week 2014 was a resounding success. Held from the 27th to the 31st of October, CTW 2014 was a forum of exchange of information on innovative and proven technologies for coastal lines. This is in keeping with the unit's objective of promoting the efficient development and implementation of coastal protection interventions at optimal cost, as well as the recommendations of engaging in a continuous monitoring program for coastal processes. At the event, local, regional, and international coastal suppliers demonstrated the use of drones, special photography, videography, and other soft engineering practices to monitor and detect coastal erosion. The event was mutually beneficial as the Coastal Protection Unit's knowledge was broadened on alternative coastal technologies which are environmentally friendly and conducive to the environment of Trinidad and Tobago.
Now we're standing up eerily close to what can easily be recognized as a coastal site, erosion site that is, and Ms. Weeks here is with us. Ms. Weeks, tell us exactly what we're seeing here.
What you're seeing here is a coastal cliff being undermined by wave action. So what essentially occurs is that, well, the body of water in front of you would be the Gulf of Paria. And even though the energy here is quite calm, over time it erodes the base of this cliff, the wave energy. And because most of the cliff doesn't have any support at its base, it causes coastal slumping, coastal cliff slumping. So if you would look at, different shots along this coastline, you would see that there are areas which are totally slumped. You would see material from the top just slid down towards the shoreline.
That's fascinating to me because we are at least about 30 to 50 feet up, and the soil is gradually being eroded. Describe how the wave action does all this exactly.
Well, it's just basically like the pounding of the waves. And of course, with a different type of geological material, that action of the wave wouldn't have the same impact. For instance, if it was metamorphic or igneous rock here, it would certainly stay sturdy in this environment. But because it's mainly muds and clays and, unconsolidated material, the action of the waves would cause it to become unstable and disintegrate at the base.
All right, so then what plans does the Coastal Protection Unit have to deal with this?
Well, it's very exciting actually. We plan to, in the first instance, stabilize 530 linear meters of coastline along this cremation site. We plan to build 2 meters above chart datum, which is the point zero, and of seawall. And we're also going to dissipate the wave energy by building also a rubble mound revetment, which will also be 530 meters long.
What is this actually going to look like? Can you give us examples?
Well, yes, actually, if we look at the Mosquito Creek, which is just north of here, you would see these big mounds of igneous rock. It'll be these gray, huge boulders. That is basically, essentially, what the rubble mound revetment is going to be looking like. It's just going to be a mound of rock, which will span the length of this cremation site, and in front of that we're going to be placing a seawall, which is essentially what you would see in places like Guaguari and stuff like that the government would have built.
Ms. Weeks, we're at the Shore of Peace cremation site, as you mentioned earlier. I guess this will obviously be a protected site, and there's some great importance placed on making sure that this place stays stable.
Yes, one of the reasons why, well, first of all, I should say that observations starting in 1998 would have confirmed that 4 hectares of land have been lost at this particular site. So actually, where we stand now, it's very different from where this edge of the cliff would have been in 1998. So it's established that it's eroding, and given that it's eroding at such a rate, because this is an important cremation site and to also our national patrimony, because this has been existing for quite some time, the cremation site. So this is one of the reasons why the ministry chose to protect this and deem this as critical, because if nothing was done, or if there was no state intervention, there certainly would have been some impacts along the piers that you would see at the edge of the cliff.
Can you describe what kind of substance is igneous rock? How are we so certain that itself would not be eroded?
Well, good. Well, that's actually a very good question. Igneous rock is known around the world for being one of the best materials that one can use to stabilize. Well, to stabilize coastline in a marine environment. The reason why is because the geochemistry of the rock, as well as the formation, because it's
Is it volcanic?
Yeah, you could say so. It's what you would call intrusive volcanic rock. What you see coming out of volcanoes, you would see stuff like basalt, like lava and stuff like that, and andesite. Those sorts of things is what you would see at the surface. But when rock has had a lot of time to cool within the earth, it becomes very hard, and the chemistry becomes very different, and it becomes very resilient. But when we mine it, of course, you have to mine it to get it to place on the coastline. Because it doesn't have any micro fissures or anything like that, it is not susceptible to salt getting into it and expanding and causing it to disintegrate.
So it's impermeable then?
Precisely, exactly. Very suitable for a coastal environment.
Now, where are you getting this igneous rock, one, and what is going to be the cost for a project like this specifically?
Trinidad does not have igneous rock. Trinidad has many sedimentary and metamorphic rock. So that is really up to the contractor, whatever is the most economically feasible option for the contractor. I can say that, in Study Park, Tobago, there's an igneous rock mine.
Okay.
And also in places like St. Lucia and Dominica. Like
Right.
most of the other Caribbean islands are volcanically formed, but Trinidad is not volcanically formed, but not from Trinidad. We don't have igneous rock here in Trinidad.
Get some more importation to do. Well, thanks so much, Ms. Weeks. It's just one of the sites where you can see clear examples of coastal erosion. One of the many sites that will be tackled by the Ministry's Coastal Protection Unit. Amidst the rubble of the high tide here in Captiville, I'm standing up next to Mrs. Candice Gray-Bernard. Hi, Mrs. Gray-Bernard. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
All right. So, what is your post in the Coastal Protection Unit, and exactly what are we seeing here?
Okay. I am the shoreline management specialist for the Coastal Protection Unit, and what you're actually seeing is the interaction of the high tide with the shoreline here in Captiville. The Ministry of Works and Infrastructure has identified the Captiville shoreline as one of the areas for emergency intervention works, and our project will be starting from the Chinket River mouth, going all the way up to Sunset Beach, approximately 900 kilometers of protection, 900 meters of protection, just under a kilometer of works that we propose to do here in the Captiville area.
Now we're seeing here lots of car tires, a lot of big blocks. What exactly happened here?
Yes. Well, this is really born out of a need by local residents to protect and safeguard their properties. And it's something that you would find all over the shoreline, where persons who are being impacted by coastal erosion have taken it upon themselves to do something. And I mean, anybody could understand that. I mean, if you live on the coastline, you have your property here, it's been impacted by erosion, your house is being threatened, your livelihood is being threatened, there's a need to do something immediately. A lot of the times, unfortunately, some of these ad hoc interventions
Do more harm than good.
exacerbate the situation, and it can also lead to a false sense of security in terms of it's not properly constructed. If it's impacted by an event that it cannot withstand, then you have that false sense of security.
And of course, it adds to littering, which we want to prevent at all costs.
Yes.
So what is the ministry about to do in this area?
In this fiscal year, the ministry has a project entitled the Captiville Shoreline Stabilization Works, where we propose to construct 900 meters of a rubber mound revetment, starting from the river mouth, going along the coastline that you see here to Sunset Beach. Yes.
Just to get into what kind of damage this can do, is this a serious situation? Get into exactly how much damage can be done to property here.
Right. Coastal erosion is a natural process, and I think it's something that the ministry would want all persons to understand. When there is no further room for the erosion, this is where the vulnerability is increased. Along the Captiville shoreline here, we have erosion at a rate of about 1 to 3 meters, depending on where you stand. So, for example, here, erosion is happening at an average rate of about 1 meter per year. And further north, we have erosion rates as high as 3 meters per year. And it really, in terms of it threatens home foundations, in terms of the agricultural sector, it threatens arable lands, in terms of saltwater intrusion into arable lands. So it really is something that has a major impact on coastal communities.
Of course,
Yeah.
economically impacts those who are already strapped for cash.
Of course, of
So,
course.
exactly when is your project aimed at starting, and how long do you think it will take before it's completed?
The project is aimed to start, as I said, in this fiscal year. Right now, the ministry is going through what we call the CEC process, or the Certificate of Environmental Clearance process, where we want to ensure that we have all regulatory approvals before the project starts. Because suffice to say, coastal works do have an impact, because one structure that you may put here to protect this stretch of shoreline could have an impact on another stretch of beach that may be eroding or has not been eroding. So we're ensuring that we have all environmental clearances. So definitely within, I would say, second, third quarter of this fiscal year, the Captiville project should commence. The project is carded to take 1 year, in terms of the duration of construction.
So there's hope on the horizon. Thanks so much, Mrs. Gray-Bernard.
Not a problem.
It was a pleasure. So Mrs. Gray Bernard, we're now standing up in the carcass.
Yes, we are.
What's happening here exactly?
Well, the erosion as well is impacting this stretch of the shoreline. Behind us we have what we call Constance Estate. So it shows you that erosion not only impacts the built environment, but it's also impacting the agricultural sector as well, because Constance Estate is a very well-known coconut estate that supplies the coconut industry.
Now, there was a road that came down here.
Yes.
What happened to that road?
Well, that road has been eroded. Since 1994 to now, we've seen a very drastic regression of the shoreline in this stretch of the area here and on the stretch of coastline. So that road has actually been eroded for about a quarter mile.
So what are the plans does the ministry have for this area?
Currently, we do have two plans. One, in terms of our emergency intervention works, we are looking at constructing a flexible structure along the stretch of coastline for about 500 meters. And in year 3 of the program, we actually do have a study that will look at the entire Ikaka shoreline with respect to developing sustainable solutions for this entire stretch of shoreline.
And these studies will eventually give us a better idea of why this happens, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly, because as we were discussing earlier, erosion really occurs when you have that imbalance between what is required to sustain the healthy beach, and when sediment is no longer being provided at that rate, then we have erosion occurring. The issues as to why sediment moves, of course, it boils down to the science of the wave and the interactions, etc. So the ministry is looking to do a study to understand that environment so that we can better decide what long-term solutions are best for this stretch of shoreline. But in the meantime, we have lost, we estimate, about 6.5 hectares of land in this area.
Wow.
To date. So the ministry is looking to implement a emergency intervention project that is flexible. I would want to stress on that in nature for the stretch of shorelines until we are able to implement long-term solutions.
As usual, we will be getting interactive later in the program. This week, I will be joined live on set with Ms. Khafi Weeks, Director of the Coastal Protection Unit. So stay tuned.
See the coastal areas, we can see that coastal erosion is a big deal. Right now we're at the North Coco site at the mouth of the Le Branche River. What's happening here exactly?
Well, basically, I'm really happy that we're here today so we can see erosion in action. The wave energy is pretty high, and also the river is flowing at pretty full capacity at the moment. So you can see that that a lot of the sediments are actually dropping into the river and being taken away by the ocean here.
Now we're standing on sand,
Yeah.
and sand it's pretty easy and erodes pretty quickly as well.
Yeah.
And as you said, the water is flowing really fast. How much worse is this going to get?
That's what we're trying to stop, because sometimes here, well, actually the Institute of Marine Affairs, they have recorded erosion rates as high as 4.8 meters per year in this part of the island. So, and also this part of the island is very prone to squalls. As you can see, we're in the middle of one right now. So that is why a lot of projects are actually being, planned by the ministry to be taking place on the eastern seaboard of Trinidad.
So for a situation like this exactly, what plans do you guys have? What materials will you be using?
Oh, okay, good. I'm really excited to say this. What the ministry has planned is 100 linear meters of vinyl sheet pile seawall. And we're also going to be building launching and berthing facilities, because this is a project that we're doing jointly with the Ministry of Food Production, Fisheries Division. Along the entire eastern seaboard of Trinidad, there's no, facility for the local fishermen to actually berth or launch their boats. And you see so many here. You see further up the river along this side as we go further south. So what the ministry is doing is building a vinyl sheet pile seawall and berthing and landing facilities. And the reason why we're using vinyl sheet pile seawalls, because actually this is quite innovative and new technology in Trinidad. We're trying to go away from the traditional engineering methods of using like a concrete-based seawall and stuff like that. And we're trying to use materials that are quite resilient to a coastal environment. So vinyl, unlike iron and steel and all these different things, that actually stand up to the salt action. So
You again, terminologies: vinyl sheet pile, steel wall,
seawall.
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 And not many of us could imagine what this is gonna look like. But how long do you think this will last? Is it permanent?
Well, yes, this is definitely a long-term intervention that the ministry has planned. So yeah, it certainly is a permanent structure.
Now, we're seated at the mouth of the Nariva River, which is the South Coco site. Ms. Weeks, what's going to be happening here?
The ministry is trying to mitigate against the effects of the waves on the only main road that runs along the eastern seaboard, which is the Manzanilla Main Road, as well as the effects of the wave action and erosion on the sensitive ecosystem you see directly behind the road, which is the Nariva Swamp.
Right.
So what the ministry proposes to do within this fiscal year is to build a 800-meter igneous rock rubble mound revetment trending southward from the mouth of the river mouth.
Next to this metamorphic rock, we have some wave dissipators that were placed there a long time ago. What's going to happen to those things?
Well, the ministry would be removing those pillars as it puts down its rubble mound revetment.
Right.
So yes, because the rubble mound revetments would be a lot more effective in mitigating the wave impact on the shoreline.
And I guess the work here is really important because this is the only access road on this side. This is the Manzanilla Main Road, and of course, too much salt water gets into the mangrove, it damages those, and the wave. What do you call it? The wave line.
The wave line, you can see actually,
Very
if
close
you
to
get a
the
shot
road.
of it, it's on the road actually. You can see the highest extent of, well, the most inward extent of the waves would be on the road, and you will see the line right there. So it's already impacting on the main road itself.
This pretty much says that this place is flooded whenever there's a serious storm.
Yes, it is. Not to mention, if the ministry does nothing to try to reverse the impact here, it certainly will be impacting the road, and not only that, but also lines of communication, electricity lines, and all of that. So we really need to take some action here. Also, you would notice, I don't know if you would see, when we go further down today, you would see that there have been revetments built in the past. But the revetments are discontinuous. So we're just trying to bridge the gap, to fill the spaces where there's no revetment. But the ministry would have put down about 10 years ago.
After the break, we will be taking your calls and tweets live on air. Have your say by calling us on 622-4141 extension 4, or you can tweet your questions to @MOWIGOVTT. You are watching WeTV on CTV.
Mrs. Gray-Bernard, we're on the Frontin Bay in Mayaro. What exactly is happening here?
Well, we are actually on a tour with our consultants who have been commissioned by the ministry to undertake the Mayaro-Guaya Coastal Protection Studies. And that particular project is part of the ministry's long-term strategy towards coastal protection. You will have over the couple days, well actually yesterday, seen a lot of our immediate intervention or emergency intervention works. This particular project is different, where we're actually looking at the Mayaro and the Guayagari shoreline, about 32 kilometers in total. And the consultants are here to develop long-term solutions to address the issues of coastal erosion. And it's not just about coastal erosion. You're seeing the back shore here. We have a watercourse that is outfalling onto the beach and it's blocked. So when you have a blocked watercourse, it can lead to issues such as flooding, etc. So these are sort of issues that can occur on the shoreline as well.
Is flooding the only thing that is impacting the residents here?
Oh no, coastal erosion definitely is a major issue here. We visited the St. Joseph village, our government traveling quarters. You're here on Frontin Beach. We go down to Guayagawari, Plaisance Park, Church Street area, and all those areas are suffering from erosion. As a matter of fact, we just had a discussion with respect to the migration of tourism out of the area because of the erosion. The IMA has estimated that this stretch of shoreline is eroding at a rate about 1 meter per year. And we do get some episodic regression in terms of when there are storm events. In 2006, this stretch of shoreline would have receded by about 2.2 meters. Yeah, so it really is a drastic issue here that is impacting not only residential, but in terms of commercial property, resort property, infrastructure as well. You see the road right in the background.
So definitely some urgency. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray-Bernard.
Yes.
Now, the urgency is evident, and to talk a bit about what exactly the ministry is going to be doing is the contractor for the area, Mr. Cushing. How are you doing, sir?
Good day.
Mr. Cushing, can you tell us exactly what will you be doing to remedy this? What's happening here?
Well, before we're going to talk about solutions, we're first going to look at what's really going on in detail. So the project exists out 2 phases, the feasibility phase and the detailed design phase. The feasibility phase, which we just started with, is first focusing on a proper understanding of the coastal process along this coastline in Mayaro and Guayagüeyare, a total coastline of almost 40 kilometers.
That's a lot.
That's a long stretch of coastline. And so the first focus will be on data gathering, wave data, beach data, sediment data, current data, and we're going to model it, and we're going to look at past developments, past evidence of erosion, using old aerial photos, and talking to people, looking at old maps, and of course, what we do the numerical modeling. And from that understanding, we're going to look what the real problems are, short-term and long-term. And then the next step, we're going to look at identifying what solutions are applicable for this whole coastline, both Mayaro and Guayagüeyare.
I don't know if you can speak a bit before you do your feasibility study, etc. From looking on at this, what do you think would be the evident causes of the erosion here?
Well, being an island, a lot of the coastline naturally erodes anyway. It's a natural process. This island will erode. That's just the natural behavior. So that is just the way. You look outside here, you see the waves day in, day out. They're losing their energy on this beach, taking away sand and moving it along the shore.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. We are very excited about this project, and it is in the end about developing a policy, coastal policy, how to deal with the problems along this whole coastline, which can be used at different coastlines of Trinidad and Tobago.
Welcome back, viewers, and thank you for staying with us here on CTV. We are joined tonight by Dr. Surudratan Rambachan, Minister of Works and Infrastructure, and Ms. Khafi Weeks, Director of the Coastal Protection Unit. Just before we get into more coastal information, Minister, you wanted to clarify some misunderstandings on the much talked about highway. Let's start with the cost of the highway. We're hearing various figures. Let's clarify that.
Just before we get into that, there was a massive rumor this afternoon that the interchange at Golconda had crashed. I saw something on the Facebook that said there was a big sinkhole that swallowed vehicles and so on. Now we know it was all the work of rumor mongering, and that is a minor landslip that took place there because the drains are still being concreted, and there were some heavy showers that caused a little slippage. But the highway is passable on both lanes, and there's been no destruction of the roadway. I just wanted to make that clear.
Social media at it again.
At it again.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know, a very popular newspaper really started it off all until it was corrected by some people who sent in pictures of what was really happening. Now, it is being bandied about that the construction cost of the highway is $7.5 billion. I want to break down the costs of the highway in terms of construction costs and the other costs so that we'll have a very clear picture of what this highway is costing. The overall cost of the highway, everything, acquisitions, everything, is $7.502 billion. The construction cost is $5.213.8 billion. So that's quite a difference we can say between saying that the construction cost is 7.5, and I'm telling you the construction cost is $5.213.8. You have construction oversight, which is costing 393 million. Land acquisition, which is very important, 700 million. Community outreach, $100 million. Construction contingencies, 556.9 million. And there is a clause in the contract for escalation in prices, but it's capped. It cannot go beyond $350 million. Right. And of course, the management fees of NIDCO and so on, $183 million. So I wanted to make clear that the construction cost is not 7.5 billion. That's the overall cost, but the construction cost to OAS is 5.213.
5.2.
Now the other matter is that this contract, it was way back on the 14th of February when advertisements were placed in the Express, the Guardian, and the Newsday. They were placed on the 14th, 18th, and 19th of February 2010. And then it was placed on the 19th also of February 2010 in the UK Financial Times newspaper. It was also placed in the Engineering News Record by ACOM on the 22nd of February. The request for proposals went out on the 24th of February. 26 companies purchased the request for proposals. And when the tenders were finally submitted, only 3 companies submitted tenders. China Railway Construction Corporation, OAS Limited, and a company called JLF Construction Corporation.
Okay.
What
so
is
just those three bid?
Although 26 companies collected and 12 had shown letters of intent. Now, China Railway Construction, they bid $6,366 million on the project. GLF Construction, their bid was $5,378 million. And OAS bid was $5,285 million. The Trintoplan estimates, VAT inclusive, was $5,229 million, and that included the Dumfries to Paria Suites segment. What is important to note also is that on the 13th of May 2010, and that's before the elections took place, the Evaluation Committee recommended an award of contract to OS be made upon satisfactory negotiation and resolution of issues raised in the evaluation report. And NIDCO Board of Directors on the 20th of May 2010 considered the recommendation report of the Evaluation Committee and accepted the recommendation that OAS Limited be the selected preferred respondent or contractor for the job. So I wanted to put those dates in perspective and also figures, to show you what was happening there. The other point is being made about the highway is that we do not have the certificates of environmental clearance. Here I have a list of all. St. Mary's Junction to Dunlop Roundabout, Point 14, that is going from Oropouche right on to Point 14. 7th of March 2008, we got the CEC. Paria Suites to St. Mary's Junction, 29th of April 2011. Debe to Mondesi, 20th of April 2010, we got the CEC. Bamboo Junction to Paria Suites, 24th October 2005, and Golconda to Debe, 23rd of April 2007. So contrary to what is being put out there, all the CECs were obtained. Now to get a CEC, Khafi will tell you, you have to have consultations, you have to fill documents and so on and so forth. People just don't take up and give you a CC like that, Khafi. Very scientific data. So that those who are bandying about and saying, we don't have these documents, all of these documents were gotten and under the proper arrangements as to how you get a CC. The other matter is raised is the route that is proposed by the HRM. The route proposed by the HRM leaves out the major towns. It leaves it out. But the route that is being built will integrate all those major towns and create greater accessibility. It is very interesting that Dr. Ray Furlong is senior traffic engineer in an article in the Trinidad Guardian of November 5th, very current, 2014. He said that he did a computer-generated route for the highway. And he said, amazingly, the computer-generated route was very close to what the manual route done by LEA Trintoplan achieved. In other words, what he's saying, that this is the best route for the highway at this point in time. So I just wanted to say a couple of these things, just to clarify and to put in proper perspective some of the debate that is taking place out there in the public.
Okay, great. Thank you, Minister. Let's touch on the issue of mediation.
Yes.
What is your position as it relates to mediation for the HRM?
Well, you know, the call for mediation is an interesting one. Let's look at some of the facts. Fact number one, the HRM went to court not on one occasion, on 3 occasions. And on 3 occasions, they lost in court. No conservatory order, no interim conservatory order was ever granted by the court. A couple of weeks ago, the HRM was publicly saying that it was no longer opposing the construction of the highway from Debe to Pinal. Now, Debe to Pinal is where supposedly the wetlands are. Of course, we know now that the highway is running on the edge of the wetlands. So if you are not opposing Debe to Pinal, why are you opposing now Debe to Mondesi? Because beyond Pinal, there are no wetlands. So what are you opposing? So then they make the argument about social impact. A social impact assessment was done, and the objectives of the World Bank were used in that social impact assessment exercise. The routes, as I said, being proposed by the HRM leaves out the towns, so there will be no benefit. The Armstrong report by itself also concluded that the present route that is being developed is the most favorable route. So I do not see the need for mediation. They asked that the NIDCO reply to the JCC in terms of how the Armstrong report has been considered. And Dr. Charles and his team has given them 75 pages of report in terms of how the Armstrong report was considered, what aspects of the Armstrong report has been applied in the situation, implemented. And one can go on the JCC site because they have put up the reply that they got from Dr. Charles in that situation. Finally, I met with civil society and I invited civil society to come on an aerial tour. I was very amazed recently when people in Project 40 were saying publicly, well, they have never visited the highway and they are protesting about the highway. So this is not a protest about the highway. This is now a protest about other matters. And it's all now a political matter.
So it extends
yes,
beyond.
Yes, so now they are saying this is about governance and what have you. So that's no problem. We all have good idealists in society, and it's good to have people with idealism. So I was also disappointed that both the Anglican bishop and the Catholic bishop, Archbishop, they turned down the offer to go and visit the highway when I gave them that offer. Tonight I want to say that I'm offering again to civil society, to Project 40, to come and visit the highway and to speak to people in the area there and to understand the motivation of people in that area as to why they want the highway and to have a bird's eye view, both from on the ground and from on top with helicopters to see where this highway is really passing. This highway is passing through a developed area. You know Debe, you know Pinal already. You're born down there. Yeah. So the highway is passing through what is already an urbanized area. So I just wanted to make those points on tonight's program.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the Coastal Protection Unit, Ms. Weeks. I understand that your unit, it's a relatively new unit with many projects scheduled for the fiscal year. Can you give us some insight on the data gathering and monitoring initiatives planned for this unit?
Well, I want to begin firstly by saying that data gathering and monitoring are foundational to everything that the Coastal Protection Unit does. We use it when we're applying for certificates of environmental clearance, as Minister would have just indicated. It's quite data intensive. We also use it in the planning and designs of our coastal structures. And we also use it in terms of formulating short to long-term policies as to how we're going to approach executing our mandate on the coastline. That being said, in this fiscal year, we do have 15 projects that are planned. 5 of them are actually data gathering and coastal monitoring initiatives. Just to give you an overview of what those 5 projects are, we have the water level monitoring project over at Mosquito Creek. Since 1852, Mosquito Creek has been a major thoroughfare for communities on that part of the island. Those communities including Aripero, where I was actually born, the minister referred to, South Oakwood, San Fernando. And so that project actually has two components. It actually is going to be measuring the tidal levels and also displaying on billboards, which will be placed on the northern and southern entrances to Mosquito Creek if there's any unusually high water levels, which may impact motorists and other users of Mosquito Creek. Another data gathering initiative I think would have been touched on during the taped segment of this program, which is the Mayaro Guayaguari feasibility and detailed design study. This study stretches from Grand Cayo Point to Point Radix. I don't think I need to get into details. I'm sure our consultant, which is Halco Trinidad and Tobago Limited, did an excellent job of explaining what the objectives of this project would be. We actually have two data gathering projects I'm quite excited to talk about this evening because they've never been done before in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, and it has not been the data we're planning to collect has not been collected by any other state agency. The data I'm speaking of would be the hydrodynamics of the marine environment that interacts with the coastline. Hydrodynamics meaning, what are the extremes of the wave impacts, the wind impacts, the oceanic currents, and also the sediment loading that a lot of the coastal structures that we plan to put on the coastline would have to withstand in order to be sustainable and robust and resilient.
And there are ways to measure all these factors, correct?
Yes, exactly. And that is that is the purpose of the consultancies, which are entitled the Comprehensive National Littoral Drift Study, which for the first time will quantify how much sediment actually flows along the coast of Trinidad and will give us the directions in which they flow. The other being the Comprehensive National Monitoring Program, where we would get, again, a good range of the extremes of those factors I just mentioned, which would be waves, currents, and stuff like that, that interact with the coastline. I also want to take this opportunity to say that our data gathering doesn't just end at the pre-feasibility stage. We also gather data after projects are in place, after our capital projects are in place. So you can measure not just the performance of the coastal structure, but also how the environment is reacting to the coastal structure being placed in it. And that again is a hallmark of sustainability, which the Coastal Protection Unit strives to enhance throughout our activities.
Great. Minister, let me point this to you. The Manzanilla Beach facility was recently closed for rehabilitation works. I understand the Coastal Protection Unit is involved in this project. Are you able to explain to us what is happening there? And Ms. Weeks, after you'll chime in.
I'll give Ms. Weeks the opportunity to do that because she's a technical expert. But capital works are going to go on there on Manzanilla Beach. There are four particular projects this year and one consultancy. The shore of peace is a very important one. It's not just about the protection of the shore of peace where bodies are cremated, but the highway that's being built there will also be protected by that 576 meters of wall. The Matlot shoreline also is another one, the North Coco shoreline and the Manzanilla Beach. Maybe Khafi can explain exactly what we're going to be doing at the Manzanilla Beach facility.
Yeah. Thanks, Minister. Well, first of all, there is an existing seawall at the Manzanilla Beach facility, which evidently could not withstand the extremes of the loading factors within a particular coastal environment. Just to give you a typical example of what I mean by saying that, there has been significant drawdown of the sediment in front of the seawall, where now the sands are at a level where the foundation of the seawall and steps leading towards the beach are exposed. And there's been wave overtopping over the seawall, which would have caused washing away of sediments behind the seawall, which would have caused it to become unstable and to sort of rotate on its foundation. The ministry, the Tourism Development Company alerted the ministry to this and asked for our assistance, and what the ministry plans to do to arrest this problem is to build a 252 linear meter vinyl sheet pile seawall in front of the existing seawall and cap it with a concrete capping. That is basically what the ministry plans to do to arrest the problem of erosion and coastal instability along that stretch of coastline in front of the Manzanilla Beach facility, which will make it safe for the users and persons who go there frequently.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we see some clips there of the Manzanilla Beach facility. All right. Ms. Weeks, Reagan accompanied you last week on a tour to some areas experiencing critical erosion. Are you able to list a few of the other areas that will be addressed by your unit?
Well, yeah. The program of critical coastal protection works, right? It spans 3 years. The overall budget is $423 million, and we have 23 projects planned within that budget and time. That being said, of course, Reagan could not have gone to all of the places that the ministry plans to do work. Minister would have just touched on the Matlot area. We have a lot of works planned for Sans Souci, Grand Riviere. We could go south to Quinam, Losiro. Well, a lot of Cap de Ville. Well, Reagan, well, Reagan went to Icacos and Cap de Ville. And Shore of Peace again. We also have a lot of works planned for the Northwest Peninsula. Also, too, one thing that we should inform the public about is that the Ministry of Works is we have not forgotten about Tobago. So in that context, we have partnered with the Tobago House of Assembly, more specifically the Department of Infrastructure and Public Utilities, which is a department of the THA, in augmenting its capacity to actually manage its coastline. Towards that end, the ministry would have sent a small team of professionals over to Tobago to gather data that would feed into a sustainable shoreline management plan for Tobago. So what we would have done is done a condition assessment of existing infrastructure, as well as a stability assessment of erosional and coastal flooding hotspots in Tobago. So again, we are quite collaborative in our approach in how we manage coastal erosion and instability along the coastline of not just Trinidad, but also of Tobago as well.
As we wrap up, any last words you want our viewers to know about your unit?
We're quite small and we're advertising for positions at the moment.
Quite small, but doing big things, protecting our coasts.
Yes. But we're currently advertising for positions in the coastal protection unit. So we're encouraging anyone who feels they're to be qualified to please apply. We welcome your applications.
Okay, great. Minister?
Well, just to tell you that the total coastline to be protected in Trinidad is 362 kilometers. And we are studying 70 kilometers of that right now. And these 15 projects we are talking about, we are going to be just addressing about 5.5 kilometers. So we have a lot of work to do, 5.5 kilometers. To be very correct, 5,552 meters.
Okay, well, that's a lot of ground to cover. Another information-packed hour. Sorry, but we have to go. Hope you could come back sometime, Khafi, Ms. Weeks, and Dr. Rambachan. Thank you, viewers, and see you next time here on CTV.